Hello everyone and welcome back to where we sometimes talk about thrillers on Thursdays. If you're new here, my name is Katie and I tend to review creepy or disturbing books here on this channel, but it has been a long time since I've just sat down and talked about books that I loved recently. So the last 5 books I've read back to back to back have all been 3.5 to 5 stars. Some are what you would exactly expect me to be reading, kind of really gritty, disturbing thriller novels, and then others are nonfiction. We've even got a really great fantasy novel in here, so just kind of different books than what I would normally read. And just so far, I think 2023 is going to be such a good reading year. But let's dive into these 5 books. No spoilers as always, and please let me know what your thoughts are on these down below. We're going to start off with the fantasy novel because I have a lot to say about this one, and I also have an interesting element that I'm going to throw into this video. But that is Nettle and Bone by Kingfisher. This follows Mara. She's in her 30s and she's shy and convent raised and the third born daughter of a king and queen. Now that I think of it, 2 of our protagonists out of these 5 are in convents. But anyway, she realizes that her sister has been married off to this other prince, is very abusive, so she's going to try and kill the prince. And she gets help from a witch, a reluctant fairy godmother, and a strapping former knight. So it is just such a fun group that's also following her around. In terms of what I loved, the fantasy elements of this were just right up my alley. One of my favorite characters was this very snarky, the kind of older witch helping her, and she's an interesting type of witch in that in this world there are witches, or they call them dust wives. Dust because they kind of lead over their own individual cemeteries, so they're called grave witches, which, as a side note, my dream job. There's also a bone dog, which is adorable. I'm not super familiar with fantasy. I wouldn't say that this is crazy high fantasy, but the side characters are incredible, just a lot of humor, and I kind of like the idea of just a standalone, really interesting fantasy novel. It's honestly just very, very hard for me to picture that someone would not enjoy this. Although I will say I did not mind this. There's not a lot of action. So if you're looking for an action heavy fantasy novel, this is not for you. It's much more character driven. Now my one con, and this is going to be a little bit different than what I normally do in this video. My one con is that Kingfisher uses a certain word, and I believe Kingfisher uses they, them pronouns, but I apologize if I'm wrong on that. But they use the word bemused about 57 times throughout this book. And my boyfriend, months and months ago, he watches a lot of YouTube. I had said, you know, you watch a lot of YouTube, if you had to critique my channel, what would you say? And it wasn't really a critique, but he said you could try maybe incorporating other elements, like maybe little skits. But I'm not much of an actor, granted neither is he, but I said if this was your idea, you're gonna be the one doing the acting. So I'm gonna go ahead and just read off a few examples of how often this word is used. And Chris has very kindly, and when I say kindly, I forced him to do this, is going to be acting out the characters. So please go ahead if you enjoyed this. Let us know down below. He could use a nice comment after having to deal with me and do this. Occasionally Mara would share a glance with him, a bemused one that said, "Can you believe 2 sensible people such as us are in this situation?" Fenris gave her one of his bemused, "How am I here?" smiles. "You drained yourself down to nothing on that bird," said the dust wife. "Did I?" Agnes sounded bemused. So that piece, of course, is a little bit of a joke, very tiny critique, but overall, so I would give it Nettle and Bone 5 out of 5 creepy candles. And I will say that's the only skit in this video. I can only force him to do so much. But next we're going to be reviewing Scorched Grace by Margot Douaihy. And this is a really interesting one because this is the first book that is coming out of Gillian Flynn Books. And just as a little sidebar, it says that Gillian Flynn Books, I apologize, the traffic's loud, my windows are shut, it's just the way it is. Gillian Flynn Books will be publishing both fiction and nonfiction, and this is the first book. So she's been posting about this all over her Instagram, so I was, really excited to pick this up. But this, again, similar to the last book, follows a nun. So our protagonist is Sister Holiday. This takes place in present-day New Orleans, and she is a chain-smoking, heavily tattooed queer nun, and she puts her amateur sleuthing skills to the test in this debut crime novel. So this, I believe, is going to be the start of a series. And Sister Holiday, again, she's younger, she's a queer nun, and she has a reason that she's become a nun, and it goes back and forth in time learning about her kind of difficult past. Especially my parents are Catholic, who grew up in a very Catholic household, reading about a nun who is very liberal and queer and tattooed was just really fun and entertaining, and I loved her character so much. The mystery element of this book that she's trying to solve is fires that are constantly, or not constantly, but fires and kind of murders that are happening around those fires within the school that she teaches guitar at. This is one I actually just finished last night, so my thoughts are still a little bit fresh on this. I loved her character so much, to the point that I really, no matter what, I'm gonna read the rest of the books in the series, and I'm really excited for them. That being said, I did not love the mystery piece of this, which unfortunately is a decent chunk of the book. Granted, I enjoyed more so her backstory and just hearing her thoughts. I thought the ending of the book was a little anticlimactic, but the mystery element and crime element overall, I just did not find very interesting at all. So I would give this a 3.5 out of 5 creepy candles. Next is one, it took me a year to finish this, but my thoughts on this might be surprising. But that is The Book of the Most Precious Substance by Sara Gran. And if you're really into horror or creepy books, the name Sara Gran might sound familiar because although I have not read it, I've heard a lot of people really, really love Come Closer. But this is an interesting one, and just so YouTube doesn't censor my video, because they can just sometimes do that randomly, I will be bleeping myself a little bit, but that just has to happen when I summarize this. But this is about, after a tragedy too painful to bear, former novelist Lily has resigned herself to a dull, sexless life as a rare book dealer until she gets a lead on a book that might turn everything around. The Book of the Most Precious Substance is a 17th century manual on sex magic, rumored to be the most powerful occult book ever written. So she's going around with another kind of male, very attractive book dealer to try and hunt this book down so they can sell it and make a lot of money. And their travels take them to New York, New Orleans, Munich, to Paris. Kind of this sweeping saga, especially for a book that is not very long. As I mentioned, for whatever reason, I don't know why, it took me a solid year to finish this. There was just a period where the middle of the book did get a little bit slow for me, but I will say I really enjoyed the beginning and I really, really enjoyed the end. So this is kind of a hard one for me to review. I've realized that I really, really love books that center around searching for something deep and creepy and old, especially if it's a book. So this book, although I didn't realize it going into it, is really just straight up my alley. And somehow, even though this book is very, very sexual, not surprisingly, it deals with magic, it's done in a way that does not feel lewd whatsoever. You know, there's some pretty things happening here, but she does it in just a way that's tasteful isn't the right word because it is kind of nasty, but whatever, I don't know, I enjoyed it. And I will say I absolutely cannot stop thinking about the ending of this book. Again, so this is a weird little book. It took me a while to get through, but in the end I would still give this 4 out of 5 creepy candles. The next 2 books are a little bit different than what I typically review because it's 2 nonfiction novels and they're both memoirs. And I'm going to talk about both of them because I don't have a huge to say about either kind of together, but it's Know My Name by Chanel Miller and I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. So a little bit of a similar theme of 2 women in their 20s, both, I have to say, incredible writers. I believe they both did not have ghostwriters, I think, and wrote these 2 books themselves. But Chanel Miller, if that name sounds familiar, I'm sure a lot of you have read this book because so many of you recommended it to me, talking about the horrible assault that happened with Brock Turner. And Jeanette McCurdy, of course, talking about, this book's hugely popular as well, so I'm sure a lot of you have already read it by this point, talking about her abuse that she dealt with her mother. Both of these, again, incredibly written. If Chanel or Jeanette come out with future books, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, I will definitely be picking them up. Know My Name, I will say 5 out of 5 stars. Incredible, and thank you so much to all of you who recommended this to me when you said I should be checking out, when I said I wanted to read some more nonfiction. I'm Glad My Mom Died was also excellent, really well written, as I said. The only piece, and it feels odd to critique this book, and I have only heard very, very positive things about it. Again, I still really enjoyed it. I would give it probably 4 out of 5 stars. My only complaint with this was that I wish maybe she had waited a year to write this. I thought it really is more so just detailing what happened in her past. And the end of the book, when she's coming to the realization that what she dealt with growing up was abuse, that piece went by just so fast. And again, she's telling her own story, so it feels almost wrong for me to critique this, but I think I was interested in the psychology of her coming to that realization, you know, in comparison when she was little and she worshipped her mom. And that piece just felt like it was a few pages in comparison to the rest of the book. And that's personally just what I wanted to hear a little bit more about. So maybe it's that I also just wish the book had been a little bit longer, especially towards that ending, but overall still really enjoyed. So those are all the books that I was going to review. I'm also in the middle of reading The Only Good Indians, which I'm really liking. Again, 2023 is just going to be a great reading year, I think. But again, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Hope you're all doing well and staying safe. And please let me know if you want to maybe see some more skits, although maybe Chris doesn't want to see comments saying that you do, but I am very curious. But again, hope you all are doing well, and I see you in the next one. Bye.